The quiet town of Independence, Missouri, was about to be thrust into a nightmare. Randy Stone, a respected businessman, husband and father, seemed to have it all. A successful career, a loving family, and a reputation that earned him admiration from the community. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect life, there were dark secrets no one had anticipated. On a winter morning, the town was rocked by the shocking news of Randy's death. His body was discovered under circumstances that raised more questions than answers. What had happened to a man who had always been seen as an upstanding citizen? What events led up to that moment? And why was he found in such an unexpected state? The discovery of Randy's death set in motion an investigation that would uncover surprising and unsettling truths, revealing a series of events no one could have predicted. The investigation quickly grew complex, with leads that seemed to point in various directions. With no immediate answers, law enforcement and the community were left to piece together the mystery of what truly happened. Was Randy's death the result of a random incident, or had something more sinister been at play? As the investigation progressed, each new discovery seemed to raise even more unsettling questions, drawing everyone involved deeper into a case that would test everything they thought they knew about the people involved and the events leading up to that day. To uncover the truth behind Randy's death, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds. It was just past 9 a.m. on the morning of January 25, 2017, when Teresa Stone, Randy's wife, walked into his office. The day had begun like any other. No signs of anything out of the ordinary. She had been expecting to meet Randy for their usual morning chat before their workday began. What she found when she opened the door, however, was something that would forever change her life. The office was unusually quiet, with the blinds drawn tightly. This was not the kind of environment Randy typically maintained. A chill hung in the air as Teresa stepped into the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. As she looked around, her gaze was drawn to the desk, where a half-finished coffee cup sat untouched. But it was when she looked towards the back of the office that her heart began to race. There, lying motionless on the floor, was Randy. His body was positioned in an unnatural way, but there was no immediate sign of struggle. The scene was unsettling, but there were no obvious signs of violence, no blood, no broken furniture. It was as though Randy had simply collapsed. Confusion filled Teresa's mind as she rushed to his side, shaking him, hoping for any sign of life. But there was none. Panic began to set in. Teresa immediately dialed 911, her voice trembling as she spoke to the dispatcher. The words that left her mouth were simple, yet the weight of them would haunt her for years. "I think he's gone. I found him in his office." Within minutes, law enforcement arrived at the scene. Officers quickly assessed the room, noting the lack of disturbance, which suggested that robbery or an external break-in were unlikely. The questions began almost immediately. What had happened here? Why was Randy dead in his office? And who could have done this? The investigation would need to answer these questions. But as the officers surveyed the scene, they knew one thing for certain. The mystery surrounding Randy's death had only just begun. What do you think happened? Subscribe now to follow the investigation, and stay tuned as we uncover the truth behind Randy's death. On the morning of January 25, 2017, Teresa Stone arrived at her husband Randy's office, expecting the usual start to their day. She had planned to check in with him before getting to work, but what awaited her behind the door would forever alter the course of their lives. As she entered, the office felt strangely still, the blinds pulled tightly, casting a dim light across the room. This wasn't how Randy normally left the space. There was always a sense of openness, a liveliness that reflected his personality. But this morning, something was off. Teresa immediately sensed the difference, a quiet tension in the air as she stepped further into the room. Her eyes were drawn to the desk, where Randy's half-drunk coffee sat untouched. Her heart began to beat a little faster as she scanned the room. That's when she saw him. Randy lay on the floor in an awkward position, still as could be. At first glance, it wasn't clear what had happened. There were no signs of a struggle, nothing out of place, just Randy, lying motionless. Teresa rushed over, her heart pounding. She bent down, calling his name, shaking him gently in a desperate attempt to revive him. But there was no response. A wave of panic surged through her. She immediately reached for her phone, dialing 911, her voice shaky as she explained, "I think he's gone. I found him here in his office." Within moments, law enforcement arrived. Officers quickly entered the room, assessing the scene with methodical precision. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication of a robbery. This wasn't the work of a random intruder. The questions began almost immediately. What had happened to Randy, and why was he found here? This was only the beginning. As the investigation began, the answers to these questions would unravel a deeper, more complex mystery that would keep everyone involved on edge. And for Teresa, the devastating truth was still hidden, waiting to be discovered. What do you think happened here? Subscribe now to follow the investigation as we uncover the truth behind Randy's tragic death. Once the police arrived at Randy Stone's office, the investigation took on a more focused direction. Law enforcement carefully examined the scene, noting the unusual quietness of the room. There were no signs of forced entry, no objects out of place, and most importantly, nothing appeared to have been stolen. Everything seemed intact, yet Randy was dead. Detective John Harris took charge of the case. The lack of clear evidence left him with an unsettling feeling. This wasn't the kind of case where the answers were easily apparent. What had happened to Randy, and who was behind his death? The first step was speaking with Teresa, Randy's wife. She had found her husband in his office, but she wasn't the only one to have had recent interactions with him. Randy's business partner, Carl Turner, had also been in regular contact with him in the days leading up to the discovery of the body. When Carl was questioned, he appeared shocked, but his statements were consistent with Teresa's. Carl mentioned that Randy had seemed unusually distant in the weeks prior to his death, but there had been no obvious reason for this change in behavior. The investigators also turned their attention to Randy's phone records. Several calls had been made to and from an unrecognized number in the days before his death. These calls had gone unanswered, but they raised a significant question. Who had been trying to reach Randy so persistently? The number was now a key focus for investigators, and they began working to trace it, hopeful that it would lead them to someone with crucial information. At the same time, forensic investigators worked through the office with precision, gathering evidence from the scene. Fingerprints were carefully collected, but they didn't offer much in terms of new insights. Randy's belongings remained untouched, which further suggested that the crime wasn't a typical robbery or random act of violence. As the investigation continued, detectives began speaking with others who knew Randy, his colleagues, his friends, and his family. They all spoke highly of him, describing him as a hardworking, reliable man who had been well respected in both his professional and personal life. But even those who knew him best couldn't provide any answers. Randy had kept his personal matters private, and no one had any idea what might have triggered his sudden death. The investigation was moving slowly, and the questions only seemed to multiply. Detective Harris knew this case wouldn't be solved quickly, but with every new lead, the mystery of what happened to Randy Stone deepened. And for those closest to him, the waiting for answers would only grow more unbearable with each passing day. The investigation is just beginning. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover the pieces of this tragic case. Don't forget to subscribe and follow along as the mystery unfolds. As the investigation continued, detectives shifted their focus to those closest to Randy Stone. The lack of physical evidence left them searching for answers in places that others might overlook. With no immediate leads pointing to a clear cause of death, the investigators began to dig into Randy's personal life. It quickly became clear that the people closest to him might hold the key to understanding what happened. Teresa Stone, Randy's wife, had found him in his office, but could she have known more than she let on? While she appeared shaken during her initial questioning, her cooperation was clear. However, there were subtle inconsistencies in her statements that detectives couldn't ignore. She had described Randy's behavior as normal in the days before his death, but there were whispers of tension between them. Still, Teresa had no obvious motive, and the lack of any significant financial or personal issues left investigators with more questions than answers. Randy's business partner, Carl Turner, was next on the list of people to question. Carl had worked alongside Randy for years, and the two had a long-standing professional relationship. When interviewed, Carl confirmed that Randy had been under some stress in the weeks before his death. But like Teresa, Carl had no real explanation for it. According to Carl, everything seemed normal, until it didn't. Despite his initial statements, Carl was now under suspicion. Had Randy confided in Carl about something? Or was there something more to their relationship than anyone had realized? Then, a troubling new lead emerged. Rumors of an affair between Teresa and Pastor David Love began to surface. The affair was whispered about in the community, but no one had ever confirmed it. Teresa and David had been in regular contact in the days before Randy's death. Could their relationship have been the motive for Randy's murder? The idea of a personal betrayal became an increasing possibility. Detectives began to look more closely at the timeline and communication between Teresa and David. The affair theory, though unconfirmed, was quickly becoming the center of the investigation. Was this a case of love gone wrong, or was there something deeper at play? The theories were multiplying, and each new detail only made the case more complex. The investigators had their suspicions, but the truth remained elusive. The more they learned, the more intricate the story became, and every new discovery seemed to take them further into unknown territory. What do you think really happened? Could an affair be behind Randy's death? Subscribe now to follow the investigation and get all the details. The courtroom was tense as the case against David Love unfolded. After weeks of investigation and mounting evidence, David was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Randy Stone's death. His role in the case had gone from a mere suspect to the central figure under scrutiny. Now, it was up to the court to determine his fate. David's defense team quickly argued that the accusations against him were based on assumptions. They denied the affair's role in the crime, claiming that the connection between David and Teresa had been misrepresented. According to David's attorneys, there was no substantial evidence directly linking him to the crime. They contended that the case was built on circumstantial evidence and speculation, rather than clear, conclusive proof. The prosecution, however, presented a compelling case. They argued that the timeline of events leading up to Randy's death and the phone records linking David to Teresa painted a picture of intentional involvement. The prosecution highlighted the growing tension between Randy and David, as well as the secretive nature of their interactions. The investigators also noted the evidence of premeditation, including the tranquilizer found in Randy's system, which pointed to a calculated plan rather than a spur-of-the-moment act. In the final hours of the trial, the prosecutor delivered a powerful closing argument, emphasizing the significance of the phone records, the affair, and the forensic evidence that tied David to the scene in ways that couldn't be ignored. They painted a picture of a man who had taken matters into his own hands, determined to eliminate a perceived threat in his life. After several days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. David Love was found guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom held its breath as the judge prepared to announce the sentence. The judge handed down a sentence of 25 years in prison. The decision was met with mixed reactions. But for Randy's family, it was a step toward justice. While the legal outcome was definitive, for those closest to Randy, the emotional toll remained heavy. The loss of a husband, father, and friend could never truly be replaced by any legal ruling. The case may have come to a close, but the questions linger. Was justice served? Subscribe for more insights into this case and others like it. The aftermath of Randy Stone's death left ripples far beyond the courtroom. While David Love was sentenced to 25 years in prison, the emotional scars for Randy's family and the community were deep and long-lasting. The trial may have ended, but for those closest to Randy, the pain of his sudden death and the revelations that followed were far from over. Teresa Stone, Randy's wife, found herself under intense scrutiny. Though her involvement in the case was never proven in court, the rumors surrounding her relationship with David Love continued to haunt her. She had lost not only her husband, but also her place within the tight-knit community they had built. The public's perception of her was forever altered, as whispers of the affair and its connection to Randy's death remained a source of ongoing judgment. For Randy's children, the loss was something they struggled to comprehend. The tragic nature of their father's death was one thing, but the additional complexities of an affair, betrayal, and a deeply unsettling public trial made the grieving process all the more difficult. The pain of losing a parent is immense, but having the world watch as those layers of grief were exposed only added to their burden. The community was left divided. While many felt that justice had been served with David's conviction, others remained uncomfortable with the fact that the case had exposed secrets within a family that many had known and respected. The affair, the allegations, and the trial created a wedge between those who saw the case as an isolated tragedy and those who believed there was more to the story than the courtroom revealed. The conclusion of the trial may have brought a legal resolution, but for Randy's family, there was no true sense of closure. The psychological and emotional toll of the loss lingered long after the verdict. The questions remained, unresolved in their minds. Was there more to this story? What could have been done differently? As the dust settled, the emotional weight of Randy's death continued to weigh heavily on those who loved him. The lasting impact of his loss and the events surrounding it would never fade, no matter how much time passed. The case, now closed, still left a deep mark on the lives of everyone involved. Was justice truly served? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to stay updated on more in-depth true crime stories. The aftermath of Randy Stone's death left the community in a state of shock, and even after the legal proceedings, the questions continued to linger. The trial had reached its conclusion with David Love's conviction, but for those close to Randy, the unsettling feeling that there was more to the story than what was presented in court remained. Teresa Stone, Randy's wife, found herself caught in a whirlwind of public attention. Though she was never formally charged with involvement in the crime, the rumors surrounding her relationship with David Love persisted. The affair had been discussed widely, but the true nature of their connection and how much Teresa may have known about Randy's eventual fate remained subjects of speculation. While she had suffered the loss of her husband, she also faced the emotional burden of community judgment. Her actions were placed under a microscope, and the pain of losing Randy was now compounded by the constant whispers and assumptions from those around her. Randy's children, too, struggled with the complex grief of losing their father, knowing that the truth surrounding his death was still partially hidden. The discovery of the affair had shaken them, but what they could not come to terms with was the fact that their father's death was now part of a much larger story, one filled with personal betrayals and unanswered questions. While the jury's decision had brought a sense of legal closure, it had done little to ease the emotional pain that came with the unresolved aspects of the case. The town, once unified in its admiration for Randy, now found itself divided. Some sympathized with his family, understanding that no one truly knew what was going on behind closed doors. Others struggled to reconcile the public image of Randy with the secrets that had come to light. The ripple effect of the trial had impacted not only the immediate family, but also the broader community, leaving people to reflect on the complex nature of human relationships and the consequences of secrets held for too long. Despite the conviction, there remained questions that lingered. Had the full extent of Randy's death ever truly been uncovered? Was the affair really the driving force behind his murder? Or was there something more to the story that had yet to be revealed? The emotional scars left by Randy's untimely passing and the trial that followed remained etched in the minds of everyone involved. Do you think the full truth has been uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more detailed investigations into cases like this one.